people want to know that somebody knows them and cares about their well-being. Once you establish that, you have to focus on giving them some stretch goals. People want to master something to be engaged, and they also want some freedom to be able to navigate their work environment. They want some control over maybe their task or their team or the time it takes. And I think once you give some autonomy, you give some mastery, and you connect to their purpose and link it to the purpose of the business. It sounds like you have really strong family values. Well, guess what? We care about families too in this business, and we want to deliver X, Y, and Z. When you start doing those things, you have highly engaged employees. And then it's just a matter of making sure that you teach them how to deliver that same level of care that you deliver to them out to those people we call customers.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Rodger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. In recent years, we've heard a lot about employee engagement. Today, we're going to explore customer engagement, and we have the perfect guest in that exploration. Dr. Joseph Michelli is a renowned author, speaker, and business consultant. He's known for his expertise in customer experience, leadership, and organizational culture. Over the years, he's established himself as a thought leader in the realm of business strategy, helping companies create meaningful connections with customers while improving their internal operations. His approach is rooted in the belief that businesses should place people, customers, employees, and stakeholders at the heart of everything they do. Joseph has written best-selling books on Starbucks, Zappos, and Airbnb, and his book Prescription for Excellence hit number one on the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today bestseller lists. His most recent book is titled All Business is Personal. Dr. Joseph Michelli, welcome to Leadership.
Well, Dr. Duncan, it is a great honor to be back with you. Thank you.
Now, you quote Peter Drucker as saying, if you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. How does that idea relate to your work with companies?
Well, that wasn't maybe his most astute comment. It seems somewhat self-evident, probably, but many of us really resist changing what we are comfortable with. And in this particular, instance of talking about One Medical, that company really just decided that healthcare was broken. And rather than just putting Band-Aids on it and trying to, sail out a little bit farther from shore, they really wanted to find a way to ask why. Why are we doing all this stuff? Why are we continuing to do what we've always done? Because it's not getting us where we need to be. So I think the fundamental challenge for us is we want to make improvements. Is it incremental? Is it really requiring us to get optimized about what would great look like if we didn't hang so tight to the things we know?
Right. Now you write a lot about One Medical that you just mentioned. Now, that was a startup purchased by Amazon for $4 billion. What are your key takeaways from the One Medical story, and how do those takeaways apply to other businesses?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that they weren't aspiring to be acquired by Amazon for $4 billion. I think you can't start off as your destination thinking, how am I going to get acquired? You have to think about, how do I create value? It is in the creation of value that you become valuable. And so in this particular instance, Tom Lee, who was a Harvard-trained primary care physician, wanted to create greater value in medicine. And he felt like his training was broken, that there was a lot about primary care that wasn't making sense to him. And so he was going to learn how to do that by going to business school, which is a good step. I mean, it's one thing to know your trade. It's another thing to know how to bring any successful solutions to market. So he went to Stanford Business School. We have a Harvard-trained physician who went to Stanford Business School. Guy has a challenge educationally, right?
You don't see that every day.
It's not much. He came out of Stanford and he created an app that really took the physician's desk reference, that big blue book that physicians relied upon to determine whether or not there'd be drug interactions when they prescribe things. And he put it online. And it was back in the BlackBerry days, and literally it was the first time you could open your BlackBerry and look at whether or not the drug you're prescribing was going to interact with any other drugs that the patient was currently receiving. So that was a big step, but he felt like a product innovation wasn't enough. And so beyond his development of that breakthrough app, which is still around today, he said, let me see if I can actually change the way service is delivered. And so he opened a clinic in San Francisco, hired a bunch of technologists from the Silicon Valley to start developing some applications for that setting. It was not in your traditional outpatient medical facility somewhere out in the suburbs near a hospital. It was in downtown San Francisco in the high rise. And he literally had a marketing person running up and down and on the elevator, handing out brochures to people saying, hey, maybe you should get your medical care right here in the building. And that was kind of the beginning. But much of what he did was ask, why is it that the only way they could make an appointment with me is if they called me during regular business hours? What if we could put that on that BlackBerry of the day and avail people the opportunity to schedule an appointment whenever it was convenient for them to start scheduling and not wait until it was convenient for you to have a receptionist in the office? And so that began the journey. And then it just kept going with, well, why is it that you have to sit, Rodger Dean, in the waiting room when you have a scheduled appointment time? And then beyond having to sit there, why is it that you have to go past the scale every single time and then they ask you to weigh in? Particularly if you're going in for a cold, where your weight is not a relevant clinical issue. And then why is it that when you get into the exam room, you sit and wait again? So Tom Lee developed an experience where you could schedule on your app. 97% of the time, you're going to be seen within 3 minutes of your scheduled appointment time.
Wow.
Your provider comes from the exam room and walks you back. They pass that scale unless it's clinically relevant, like at a physical. And then they're talking to you the whole time, building rapport while you're sitting in the room with them, not waiting for them to come in. And that's really the renovation of the experience. It was so attractive that, yes, $4 billion was invested by Amazon to take it over.
Well, that's amazing. It makes me think somebody should write a book called All Business is Personal.
Well, yeah, it was amazing you didn't already write it. So since you hadn't written it, I figured I better get around to it.
Well, now you emphasize the importance of creating meaningful human connections in business. You just talked about that. Elaborate a little bit more, if you would, on why personal connections are so crucial to business success.
Yeah, we are bombarded by offers and impersonal service everywhere we go. And so the rare few that figure out that I need to not only care for you by transacting business well, I need to care about you. I need to care about your story of where you're coming from and where you're going to and why this product matters to you. I need to care about how I deliver the product to you, not just that the product is solid for you. And, I think we sometimes think that takes a lot of money and a lot of investment. It really just takes a different level of consciousness and a willingness to say that I'm in this for a relationship, not a transaction.
A big difference. Now, you cite research showing that customers with a strong emotional connection have a 306% higher lifetime value than those without that bond. My question is, how does the idea of a strong emotional connection apply to a company that sells me tires for my car or that fertilizes my front lawn?
Well, first and foremost, the numbers sound like I'm fertilizing somebody's front lawn, right? 306%, lifetime value increase. That's pretty crazy, but it's really true. And here's where it comes down. Let me give you two different tire shop experiences that I've had personally. So both of them guaranteed lifetime rotating of my tires, right? Both companies. The first one, which I no longer use, I think was wishing that I would never come back in just to have my tires rotated.
Right.
I mean, I think that's fundamentally what, even though they had it as a part of their value proposition, they were hoping I would not use it. Now, the other company would send me a message via my text messaging and say, it's about time for your tires to be rotated. It's really important that you do that because you then preserve the investment you made with us on those tire purchases. Plus, it just increases the safety as you transport your family. Now, I go back in there. Guess what? I buy tires for them for the rest of my life.
Sure.
Unlike the first one, which really only treated me like, okay, I got your money. I know I made an extended promise, but if you're not smart enough, Joseph, to keep track of it, I'm sure as a heck not going to do it on your behalf. The other one cared about me like Mama does. Mama used to anticipate my needs and kind of think about what I needed up the road a piece. And quite frankly, that's the difference, I think, between that loyalty factor and two transactions, tire purchases and follow-up service, one of which cared about me.
My guess is you told people about that second tire operation too.
Well, let me just tell you right now, tell people on your show, and there can't be a much larger audience for it at all. So,
now, when it comes to separating business from personal relationships, what's the biggest misconception that people have?
Yeah, I think it's one of two. The probably biggest one is that if I make it personal, then I'm going to get in the deep mire and muck of human tragedy, right? Like I'm going to enter into this relationship. I think it's really sad because we have an epidemic of loneliness in our country right now. One of the companies I wrote about years ago was a company called Zappos, which was also purchased by Amazon, strangely enough. But Zappos literally encourages their contact center folks to just talk to people and develop what they call a PEC, or a personal emotional connection. And sometimes people will call them and just ask questions about things other than shoes. And a lot of business owners would say that's really bad. You should just really kind of keep your lane. But in reality, people contact them and also then buy stuff, because most of us operate on a principle of reciprocity. And that is, if you give me your time and you give me your care, I feel some level of obligation to reciprocate. And so this notion of lead with your humanity and trust that humanity will cause reciprocal humanities, often in the form of purchases. I think that's the misconception, is that if you do it, it's not going to be productive, or if you do it, you're going to get in the muck and mire.
Reminds me of my choice of dermatologist. I go to one that's 27 miles away, and there's another one that's 2 miles away. I drive 25 more miles because the dermatologist I've seen for years treats me like a person rather than a cog in a machine.
Yeah, and people will travel great distances. 25 miles extra is no small task. I mean, when you're going both ways, right?
Yeah.
But literally, people will cross by 3 or 4 coffee shops to go to their favorite coffee shop.
Sure.
Even if it's not mileage, right? Even if it's not mileage, they're passing by other options because you've done something that created a personal bond with them.
Right.
And you look forward to seeing that person in the morning who knows your name and asks about your recent vacation.
Let's talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. In a professional setting, how does emotional intelligence relate to building a personal connection with others?
So I think we've made emotional intelligence so complex. I mean, it's really very simple.
Right.
It's our ability to manage our emotions and our ability to read the emotions of other people. And if we have those two things and we use our skills for the good, that's emotional intelligence.
Sure.
It advances our cause. It advances the life of the people around us. So really, in a bottom line sense, if you are unable to read the cues of the person you're serving, you're not going to develop a personal relationship with them. You're going to just be transactional because you can't even figure out how to connect. And if you don't know how to manage your emotions, you're not going to be able to deal with difficult clients. You're not going to be able to deal with employees who are having difficult days and keep them focused and on task. Really, emotional intelligence is our capacity, and it's a trainable phenomenon, which I love. It's not like IQ, where we're kind of born with that learning potential, or we aren't. But EQ, we can really develop over time by learning to read those nonverbals, to ask more questions. Well, what does that mean to you? How might you be feeling? What else is going on? Really just creating hypothesis. Maybe Rodger Dean is feeling this today because I'm noticing this about him. And then simply asking. And when you ask and people feel like you are genuinely interested, they tend to open up and talk about themselves, and that builds a relationship.
Yeah, EQ is really not that complicated, I don't think. As you say, it definitely can be learned and developed.
Yeah, it's not that complicated, but it is probably one of the greatest predictors of leadership success. It's one of the
For
greatest
sure.
predictors of life success and happiness even. So, grab an EQ book.
Yeah. So, what are the most common mistakes that leaders make when trying to create personal connections with their teams?
Yeah, I think trying is probably the key word of that question. I mean, the reality is if you're authentic with people and you have reasonable boundaries, like this is an issue, I think. When I was writing a book a long time ago about dealing with the pandemic, and people were really emotionally in crisis a lot, both the leaders and their teams. And we saw lots of over disclosure, like people talking way too much. And people were doing Zoom meetings in their bedrooms, right? And it got a little weird in terms of where was the personal, where was the professional. And so, I think over disclosure is an issue. Under disclosure is a bigger risk. Most leaders feel like they have to keep it all together. They don't want to disclose much,
Right.
And in reality, being authentic, being sensitive to the fact that it's not about you as the leader, but it is important that your humanity is present and that you give people something to connect to.
Yeah.
You're not just an object that supervises them.
It's okay to be human.
It is. And vulnerable to a point. Like, I don't want to disclose all my personal issues. It's not your employee's responsibility to solve your marital problem.
Right. Yeah. Can a business culture be too personal? Where's the line?
Yeah, I think if you're not performance-based, there's the line, right? The reason I want to build personal relationships, because we're going to spend a lot of time together. We're going to try to create great things together. We're going to accomplish a mission. If I'm not moving in the direction of mission, one of the things about Zappos, the company I mentioned earlier, is that, they have all this fun and employees are connecting with work. Managers are required to spend a certain percentage of time with their teams outside of the work environment. It's kind of crazy. But all of that is to a performance goal. So maybe I'm going to make a commitment to wear, a leprechaun outfit if we hit a performance goal. That's a pretty personally vulnerable thing for me to put on a leprechaun outfit. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Unless you all are going to work your rear ends off to help us achieve that performance goal. So I'll be personally vulnerable under the condition that we achieve something magnificent together and poke some fun at my expense.
Right.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Rodger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
Now, you highlight the role of customer experience. What does a personalized customer experience look like from a business perspective? You've told us about the great experience you have with the people where you buy tires. Give us a couple of more examples.
Yeah, I think it's got to be at scale, right? So at some level, for people who aren't spending a whole bunch of money at your business, you're going to try to give them an experience where they are seen, heard, and known, but not at the level you're going to do your highest book of business. So your highest value customers, you're going to make very personal efforts. Let's pretend I'm a financial advisor, for example. My high net worth clients are the ones I'm going to send, golf balls to that appears for them right, on the fifth tee of the great golf resort they're on vacation at. And they're going to arrive right as they're about to tee off, right? That's personal at a level of, oh my gosh, I know you're there. I know how important this is. I am sending you something that you are going to enjoy in the moment. Whereas if I'm on the lower book of business, I might send you, some stamps, some 2 or 3 or 4 cent stamps in case the postal rate goes up, right? Like I'm just saying, look, I know the postal rate's going up. You may have some stamps in your drawer that are going to be, short. I'm going to send you some, right? And that's that sense of, I care about you. I anticipate some of your needs. I'm doing it at a whole different level of scale based on kind of your overall value relative to my book of business.
It's amazing how, in terms of monetary cost, so much of this is not very costly at all.
Really not.
It's just human beings interacting with each other and caring for each other.
I would venture to guess that dermatologist that you referenced earlier is spending no more money on you as a patient than the dermatologist who lost you 2 miles away, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't a money thing. Often it's, I know who you are. I'm excited to see you. I'm prepared to see you. I'm grateful that you were here, and you can feel it when you leave. I say, thank you for coming in. I appreciate your business. I'd love to see you again. Here's a special, that we're running in, whatever, right? I mean, it's that sense of, I am not spending any more money on you than I am on anybody else, but you're feeling the love.
Well, and he and I have become friends. I asked him about his children. How are they doing? Your son was playing soccer last year. Is he still playing? And I mean, we've got a relationship. It's not just transactional. Even though when I leave his office, I'm always in pain because he's, taking care of some dermatology issues.
Well, that's an interesting thing about healthcare in general. Oftentimes when we have experiences, we do it to seek pleasure. So if I'm writing a book about Ritz-Carlton or whatever it is I've written about in the past, it's a pleasurable experience. About Mercedes-Benz, I want something pleasurable. Healthcare is a version avoiding suffering or promoting well-being, but it's not always pleasant. And so in order to counteract the forced nature of the visit, if you will, that niceness really makes a whole bunch of difference. It really does.
Yeah, lots of difference. Now, you highlight employee engagement as a critical factor for success. What's the first step that businesses can take to engage employees on a more personal level?
I think it's taking a fundamental interest in them as human beings, not as human resources. They're not like a widget resource. They are a person. And I want to know, I can tell you engagement. I can go into a business and I can normally tell how engaged an employee group is when I ask the manager, what are the names of their employees' kids? What are their kids into, right? If that manager is aware, in tune, understanding that there's a whole person coming in to do work, and they're taking an interest, an authentic interest, not a fakey interest, a real interest in that, whether or not their kids are playing soccer, to use your example. That is the difference. People want to know that somebody knows them and cares about their well-being. Once you establish that, you have to focus on giving them some stretch goals. People want to master something to be engaged, and they also want some freedom to be able to navigate their work environment. So they're not boxed in the old business, the old concept of Taylorism, where they're in a little box that only they can do what they're ascribed to do. They want some control over maybe their task or their team or the time it takes to do something, or even some of the processes. And I think once you give some autonomy, you give some mastery, and you connect to their purpose and link it to the purpose of the business. Sounds like you have really strong family values. Well, guess what? We care about families too in this business, and we want to deliver X, Y, and Z. When you start doing those things, you have highly engaged employees. And then it's just a matter of making sure that you teach them how to deliver that same level of care that you deliver to them out to those people we call customers.
It's always been amazing to me how many very smart business people have blind spots when it comes to this sort of thing. As you talk, I was thinking of the senior executive. He was actually the CEO of a world-renowned engineering firm. This was 30 years ago. And he said they were making some adjustments in their workforce, and they were going to have a furlough for some of their, quote, non-essential personnel. And I said, Did you hear what you just said? He said, well, non-essential personnel. I said, do they know they're non-essential? He said, well, that's just a term we use. I said, why don't you just call them drones? And he said, oh, that wouldn't sound friendly. And I said, guess what? Non-essential personnel doesn't sound all that friendly either. And I went down the list of some of the job descriptions of those people and talked about some of these huge engineering projects they had all over the world. And I said, if they decide not to show up for work one day, is that going to affect the work? He said, oh, they have to come. And I said, well, you need to stop calling them non-essential personnel.
Yeah, if they're not essential, they shouldn't be on your payroll.
That's true.
Right? If they're not essentially creating value for you, they shouldn't be on your payroll.
Absolutely.
And if you call me non-essential, Rodger Dean, I would consider myself a road employee. And by that, I mean retired on active
duty. Yeah. Yeah. I've said this recently. I always tell people the second most expensive thing that can happen to you is when your best and brightest people quit and leave. That's very expensive. But the most expensive is when your best and brightest people quit and stay.
Yeah, yeah. I love that quit and stay line. That's the whole training. That's that point about training. What if I train them and they leave? What if you don't train them and they stay, right? Like it's that
Yeah,
same concept.
exactly. Now, when a company prioritizes personal relationships rather than just offering high salaries, what effect does that have on retention of top talent? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think you got to be competitive in the marketplace and price on salary. But if you're really just trying to drive the high salary, you're going to attract people who are just going to go somewhere else for a quarter more. I mean, if you think about it, there's that Groupon shopper who will, never pay full price to anything because they'll only buy on a coupon. That's a different audience for most of us in business. The same is true with employees. We're not just looking for people who are trying to get a quarter more. We're looking at people who want to do something purposeful, where they feel respected, where they feel challenged. And we want those people because if we can continue to create challenges for them, we can continue to create the environment where they can thrive, they're going to just take us to a different level. And so I tend to pay less attention about, are you going to leave or not? I just want to give you a heck of a hard time making that decision.
Right.
I want to make it awfully hard. I want you to sit there and think, okay, I can get 50 cents more over there, but I know how Joseph takes care of me. And I know that I get challenged here. And boy, I don't know if I can justify it. It's too much risk to go for 50 cents.
Sure. Now, with the rise of artificial intelligence and automation, how do you see technology affecting the personal side of business relationships in the future, near future and down the road?
I talked about One Medical earlier, and I think that's a pretty good example of balancing technology with people, where they use their technologies to make sure that the physician isn't doing their notes in their pajamas at night away from their kids and thus not attracting the best physicians or putting them at risk of burnout. They use that technology so that when you go into the exam room with your permission, it will transcribe the conversation between you and your doctor with all the protections of confidentiality, so that the doctor doesn't have to keep looking at that stupid computer all the time,
right,
or looking down at their notes and not be present with you in the interaction. So I think you need to learn to use these tools for the empowerment of humans to deliver what is uniquely human. Unfortunately, we're seeing lots of brands right now where you can't find a 800 number on their website to speak to a human. They put chatbots everywhere.
right.
The chatbots, some are really sophisticated and pretty great, but if I still need a human, there's no human to be had. And in other cases, the chatbots are just ridiculously stupid. I mean, if I couldn't figure that out,
Right.
I probably shouldn't be talking to you in the first place. So to me, I think we're seeing an uneven use of AI, and even as it comes along, my hope is that we don't assume that it's going to replace the need for all humans. Some, yes. I think we also need to look at how do we make sure that what we get from it empowers humans to do more in the unique lane of humanity, so that I have more time to talk with you instead of having to write notes that AI can transcribe for myself.
We have much to learn.
We do.
Now, from your research on the personal side of running a business, what has been the most surprising insight or takeaway you've derived?
I think most leaders just don't tell people what they want their brand to represent in terms of the experience of the person they're serving. By this, I mean, every time someone interacts with you, Rodger Dean, I believe you know what you want them to walk away feeling. The Rodger Dean experience, if you will, right? I think if you look at the average dry cleaner, they haven't thought about what do we want every single person to feel,
Right.
as they interact with our staff, as they interact with our website, when they come into our building. They may know what they want on the checklist of, check the pockets to make sure there's no loose items. I mean, they may operationally have defined the things to do, but not what people should feel. And so I think of humans as the human experience is really nothing more than manufacturing. The big difference is in a manufacturing plant, we will have raw material that's completely consistent. And then we'll impose a process on it. And then at the end of it, it'll be a manufacturing project, and we'll see the outcome of 0.001% defects, right? When it comes to people, they come in with such variability, and we want to give some processes so that we can move them to an outcome knowing that we're going to also have to have some human savvy to know how to nuance those processes to accommodate the raw material variations that are walking in the door. But we still want them to have an outcome. And for me, that outcome is for them to feel that they have been cared about in a particular kind of way, kind of loved on in a certain kind of way, where they feel really proud of the choice they made to come in to be with us and take time with us. And I think most businesses haven't spent any time thinking about what do we want every customer to experience every single time, no excuses, and teaching their teams the importance of doing the same.
Now, as with most things involving personal relationships, this is not that complicated.
Don't be telling people that, Rodger Dean. I want to make you think it's really, really hard, and only you and I have figured it out. Well, actually, I haven't figured it out, but you have probably.
No, your book really nails it. I love your book. Let me ask you one final question here. What question do you wish I had asked but didn't, and how would you respond?
Actually, I would ask, Joseph, what would you like to learn from me? I would love to know the one thing you think every single leader must know.
Okay, here's the one thing that anyone who aspires to be an effective leader must understand and act upon. You must know and care about your people. I've worked with leaders everywhere from White House administrations to the U.S. Senate to C-suites in some of the biggest companies in the world, down to smaller organizations. The common denominator of the most effective leaders I've seen is that they know and care about their people, and it cannot be artificial. It can't be faked. Now, of course, leaders must have other things going for them. They need to understand the needs of their stakeholders, whether those stakeholders are voters or customers or clients or by any other definition. And of course, they need to understand things like pertinent technology and market trends. But first and foremost, they must know and care about their people. Unfortunately, judging by the employee engagement numbers that have been in the tank for years, a lot of leaders apparently didn't get the memo.
Well, thank you for allowing me to ask my question vis-a-vis the question you asked me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph. Your insights apply to any business of any size, and the title of your new book sums it up. All business is personal. To learn more about Joseph and his work, go to josephmichelli.com. That's Joseph Michelli, Michelli.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, Dana Perino, David Ulrich, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Rodger Dean Duncan.